you've had that kind of day, right? The one where your brain feels, I don't know, just fried. Or maybe you're completely bored, or even, riding high on some good news.
Yeah.
And before you even really think about it, you're in the kitchen reaching for something.
Right. That bag of chips or the ice cream.
Exactly. Cookies. Not because your stomach's actually empty, but because you're feeling something. Something big, maybe. Or maybe nothing much at all.
Well, that's emotional eating. It's incredibly common. A very human thing, really.
It really is.
Yeah.
And for lots of us, it's something we want to get a handle on, maybe navigate a bit differently.
Understand it better, yeah.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to dig into the sources you shared with us, articles, some research, practical guidance.
Okay.
And we'll pull out the insights you need to figure out why you might turn to food when you're not physically hungry, how to build healthier ways to cope with emotions.
And build a better relationship with food overall.
Exactly. Think of this as your guide, distinguishing physical from emotional hunger, developing those healthy coping skills.
And the sources, well, they make it really clear from the get-go, the whole journey. It kicks off with one absolutely fundamental step.
Which is?
Learning to actually tell the difference. Are you needing fuel or are you needing comfort? That distinction is everything.
Okay, let's unpack that then, that crucial difference.
Yeah.
How do we tell? Body needing energy versus emotions looking for an outlet.
It really comes down to the signals your body or your mind is sending. Physical hunger, that's your body saying, hey, I need some nourishment.
Right.
And it builds gradually. It develops over time, maybe a few hours after you last ate.
Okay, slow build.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And often there are real physical signs. Your stomach might growl, you could feel a bit empty, maybe even slightly lightheaded if it's gone on a while.
Got it.
And crucially, this kind of hunger, it's usually satisfied by, well, pretty much any food that gives you energy. And once you've eaten enough, that physical feeling goes away. You feel satisfied. It's purely physiological.
So like you said, it's the body's fuel gauge basically saying low.
Exactly. Now, emotional hunger, that feels totally different. The sources describe it as sudden, urgent even.
It's fast.
Like a wave, yeah. And it demands immediate attention. And here's a key thing. It's often really specific. You're craving that particular comfort food.
Ah, the specific craving. Like only chocolate will do.
Precisely. Usually something high in sugar, salt, or fat. And this hunger, it doesn't really feel like it's coming from your stomach. It feels like it's coming from your head, driven by that intense craving or, your emotional state.
And what about afterwards? I've heard that's a big clue too.
Oh, absolutely. Huge clue. After you eat because you were physically hungry, you usually feel content, satisfied, you move on. But with emotional eating, you're often left wrestling with feelings like guilt or shame, maybe regret.
Right.
And here's the real kicker. The underlying emotion, the thing that sent you looking for food in the first place. It's usually still there, unresolved.
Wow. Okay. So the suddenness, the specific food, where the feeling comes from head versus stomach and how you feel after, those are the big markers.
Yeah.
Recognizing that difference is definitely step one.
Absolutely vital.
Which, naturally, brings us to the next question the sources tackle. Why? Why do we instinctively reach for food when we aren't physically hungry? What is it about stress or boredom or sadness that makes us want a snack?
Well, the sources point out something powerful. Food offers an escape. It's temporary, sure, but it's potent.
A quick fix.
Exactly. A quick comfort, a distraction from feelings that are uncomfortable, maybe painful. It gives you a momentary shift inside.
Okay, and what are the common triggers?
Oh, the sources list quite a few. Stress and anxiety are probably the biggest ones.
Makes sense.
Food can feel like a quick way to soothe yourself when you're stressed. And that fight or flight response, it can actually make us crave energy-dense foods.
Interesting.
Then there's boredom, big one. Using food to just fill the void, Add some stimulation when things feel flat or you're restless.
Yeah, I can see that.
Sadness, loneliness. Food can become a stand-in for connection, or maybe a way to just numb those feelings for a bit. Even anger and frustration. Sometimes eating feels like a release, or maybe like you're stuffing down those intense emotions so you don't have to deal with them.
Right.
And it's not just the negative stuff. Happiness, celebration. Food is so tied up in joy for many cultures, but that can lead to overeating too, even when you're not hungry, just because it's part of the event.
Sure.
And fatigue. When you're exhausted, your body just screams for quick energy, which often means sugar or fat.
It's really fascinating how deeply wired these connections seem to be. Feelings driving us towards specific kinds of food.
It really is. And the sources touch on the brain science, too.
Yeah.
Eating, especially those sugary, fatty foods we crave emotionally, it can trigger the release of neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin.
Feel-good chemicals.
Exactly. They create these brief moments of pleasure, calm, stress reduction. And that immediate reward, that temporary relief, that's precisely why it can become such a go-to strategy, almost automatic.
Like a habit loop.
Yes. As one source pointed out, relying on this over time, especially for stress, it can start to feel less like a choice and more like a compulsion when those triggers pop up.
That chemical response really highlights that this isn't just about lacking willpower. It's about interrupting a deeply grooved pattern in the brain.
Precisely.
Okay, so we understand the difference between the hungers. We know the triggers. Now, for the crucial part, what do you actually do when that wave of emotional hunger hits? How do you build a different response? This is where that personal toolkit comes in.
Right. This is the proactive part, building new habits. And the sources offer some really practical strategies for this toolkit. One very effective one is called the 10-minute rule.
Okay, the 10-minute rule. How does that work?
When that craving hits hard and fast, you make a deal with yourself. Just pause. Commit to waiting 10 minutes before you act on it.
Just 10 minutes.
Just 10. And in those 10 minutes, you deliberately do something else, something from your non-food coping list. Very often, the urge significantly lessens or might even disappear completely in that time.
That pause sounds powerful. What else can you do in that pause?
A really key step is trying to identify the emotion underneath the craving. Ask yourself, honestly, what am I really feeling right now? Is it stress from work? Am I feeling lonely, bored?
Naming the feeling.
Exactly. Naming it is a huge step towards processing it directly instead of, masking it with food. One source actually suggested keeping a food diary for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, jotting down what you eat, but also your mood, what was going on around you. It can be incredibly revealing for spotting your personal patterns and triggers over time.
So becoming more aware, like a mindful observer of your own internal state.
That's a great way to put it. And once you have a better sense of the emotion, you can pivot to non-food self-soothing. The sources give lots of examples.
Like what?
Moving your body is a big one. Go for a quick walk, do some stretching, put on music and dance for a few minutes. Even light exercise can really shift your mood and energy.
Get out of your head a bit.
Totally. Or engage your other senses. Listen to music you find calming, light a nice scented candle, take a warm bath, cuddle with a pet if you have one.
Okay.
Connection is another powerful tool. Call a friend, talk to a partner or family member. Or if you need space, journaling can help get the feelings out.
Writing you down.
Yeah. Or just simple distraction with something engaging. Read a book, do a crossword puzzle, watch a funny video, work on a hobby.
Right. Change the focus.
Mindfulness techniques also come up a lot. Simple, deep breathing exercises. Just focusing on your breath for a few minutes can really calm your nervous system. One source specifically mentioned yoga and meditation as great stress management tools.
Those are becoming more common.
Definitely. And don't forget basic hydration. Sometimes thirst feels like hunger or a craving. Drinking a glass of water can also just give you that moment to pause and reassess.
Simple, but potentially effective.
And making practical changes to your environment helps too. If certain comfort foods are hard for you to resist, maybe don't keep them easily accessible at home.
Out of sight, out of mind. Sometimes.
Yes. And if you know you're feeling really emotionally raw, maybe put off the grocery shopping until you feel calmer. Also remember support systems. Lean on friends, family. Some people find support groups helpful. And one source specifically mentioned fighting boredom by actively substituting a healthier behavior, like planning an activity instead of just defaulting to snacking.
So the idea is to build this list, almost like a menu of options. Right? So when a trigger hits, you have other things you can turn to, maybe make them feel more automatic over time.
Exactly. You're building new pathways, new default responses.
Building that toolkit for the emotional side is definitely key. But it's also about the food itself, isn't it? Cultivating a healthier relationship overall, not just stopping the misuse of food, but seeing it as, well, a positive thing for your well-being.
Absolutely. It's a two-pronged approach. You need to shift your whole perspective on food. Seeing it primarily as fuel, as nourishment for your body, something that supports your health and gives you energy.
Rather than seeing it as an emotional fix or a reward or even a punishment.
Precisely. And the sources weave in several practical strategies that support this mindset shift and help manage eating habits more generally.
Okay, what kind of things?
Well, they really emphasize that being overly restrictive can actually backfire.
Right, the forbidden fruit effect.
Totally. Banning all your favorite foods often just ramps up the cravings, especially when you're feeling emotional. So the advice is more about balance. Eat satisfying amounts of nutritious foods, but also allow for occasional treats in moderation.
Planned treats.
Yeah, one source actually used the phrase plan fun foods strategically, and ensuring variety in your diet helps prevent feeling deprived too.
That makes sense. What about between meals?
If you need snacks, choose nutritious ones. You know, the usual suspects. Fruit, veggies with a healthy dip, handful of nuts, plain popcorn. Or maybe look for lower calorie versions of things you enjoy.
Okay.
And that mindfulness piece. It applies to eating itself too, practicing mindful eating. One source used a Vietnamese phrase, "Anung ko ituk," which translates roughly to conscious eating.
Conscious eating.
Yeah, it means really paying attention while you eat, being present with the taste, the texture, tuning back into your body's actual hunger and fullness signals. Simple things like chewing thoroughly nai ku was another phrase used.
Slowing down.
Exactly. The sources also talked about structuring your meals, sa bua an hapli, meaning like reasonably arranged meals. One suggestion was eating maybe 4 or 5 smaller meals throughout the day.
On 4 or 5, bunot.
Right. That can help prevent getting ravenously hungry, keeps energy levels more stable, and might make it easier to manage those sudden eating urges when they do pop up.
Stable blood sugar probably helps too.
Definitely. And visual guides can be useful for portioning and balance. You probably heard of the healthy plate idea.
Yeah, half plate veggies fruit, quarter protein, quarter grains.
That's the one. Simple visual. Or the hand principle, using your hand size as a rough guide for portions, like thumb size for fat, fist for carbs or fruit. 2 palms for veggies, 1 palm for protein.
Oh, interesting. Never heard that one.
It's just another practical tool. Ultimately, all these tips support the basic principles of healthy eating that the sources mentioned, focusing on whole foods, limiting the less healthy stuff like excess sugar, unhealthy fats, salt, and getting balanced nutrition.
So it really is a dual strategy, managing the emotional triggers head on and building these solid positive habits around food and eating itself.
Exactly. They work together.
Now, we've talked about emotional eating being common, but the sources also pointed out that it exists on a spectrum. It's not always the same level of severity. When does this pattern maybe cross a line into something more serious, like binge eating disorder?
That's a really important distinction to make. Emotional eating is common, like we said, but it is distinct from binge eating disorder, or BE. One difference noted is that typical emotional eating doesn't usually involve the kind of intense body image issues or dysmorphia sometimes seen in other eating disorders.
Okay, so what defines BED?
BED is formally recognized as a serious mental health disorder. The core feature is recurrent episodes of eating a much larger amount of food than most people would in a similar time frame, usually within about 2 hours.
Much larger amounts, frequently.
Yes, frequently and repeatedly. For instance, the criteria might mention occurring, say, at least twice a week over several months.
And what's the defining feeling during one of these episodes?
The absolute key component, the hallmark of BED, is a profound feeling of loss of control during the binge.
Loss of control.
Yeah. Feeling like you just cannot stop eating or can't control what or how much you're eating. Other signs often go along with this. Eating much faster than normal, eating until you feel uncomfortably full, sometimes even to the point of pain, eating alone or hiding food because of shame, and then having really strong feelings of distress, guilt, or self-disgust afterwards.
That sounds intensely difficult.
It is, and the sources mention that BED can sometimes be triggered by things like restrictive dieting attempts or feeling a lot of pressure or judgment about food and eating.
Okay, so if the emotional eating involves that recurring pattern, the large amounts, and especially that feeling of being out of control, that's when it might be BED.
That's the territory, yes. It's a significant step beyond occasional comfort eating.
Which leads to the question, when should someone move beyond trying these self-help strategies we've discussed and actually seek professional support?
The sources are pretty clear here. If you've genuinely tried self-help approaches, but still feel like you can't get control over the emotional eating, or if you suspect you might actually meet the criteria for an eating disorder like BED, or if you're struggling with other disordered eating patterns that are really impacting your quality of life, your health, your relationships, or if you're dealing with really complex emotional issues that feel too big to handle alone, then it's absolutely time to seek professional help.
Okay. And who provides that help?
Therapists, psychologists, and registered dietitians who specialize in eating disorders are the key professionals here. They have the training and expertise to help you understand the deeper why behind the eating patterns.
Right.
They can teach you more advanced coping skills, help you heal your relationship with food and your body, and really address both the emotional and the physical sides of the issue in an integrated way.
So seeking that specialized help isn't about failure at all. It's actually a really proactive, powerful step towards health and well-being.
Absolutely. It's about getting the right tools and support for the specific challenge you're facing.
As you start, or maybe continue, on this path of understanding and navigating emotional eating, it feels important to say, this is a journey, right? There are probably going to be good days and tough days.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where self-compassion becomes, well, maybe your most important tool in that toolkit.
Self-passion.
Yeah. The sources really underscore this. Be kind to yourself. It's so easy to fall into self-criticism, beating yourself up if you slip up or have a difficult moment with food.
That guilt cycle we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Try to remember every single meal, every single moment is a fresh start, a new chance to pause, check in with yourself. What am I feeling? What do I need? And make a different choice. Be patient. Extend yourself the same kindness you'd give a friend who is learning something new and challenging.
That's a good reframe.
And see setbacks not as failures, but as learning opportunities. Instead of just wallowing in guilt after an episode of emotional eating, maybe take a moment later when you're calm and gently analyze it.
Like a detective, almost.
Sort of. Without judgment, just ask. What was going on right before? What was the trigger? What was I feeling? What did I do? Not to blame yourself, but to gather information. Okay, that situation is tricky for me. Next time, maybe I can try X or Y strategy instead.
Use it to refine your plan.
Exactly. And focus on the positive steps you are taking, however small they seem. Celebrate those wins. Acknowledge the effort. It's about progress, not about achieving some impossible state of perfection.
Progress, not perfection. I like that. That's a really powerful reminder for any kind of change, really.
It truly is.
Okay, so let's just take a step back from this deep dive. We've covered quite a bit of ground based on the sources you provided.
Yeah.
We talked about spotting the crucial difference between physical hunger and emotional hunger. Understanding those powerful triggers, stress, boredom, sadness, even happiness that link feelings to food.
Yeah, building that toolkit of non-food coping strategies. The 10-minute rule, naming the emotion, moving your body, connecting, mindfulness.
Right, and adopting those practical, positive habits for a healthier relationship with food itself. Mindful eating, structured meals, balanced choices, not depriving yourself.
And knowing the difference between common emotional eating and the more serious binge eating disorder, recognizing when it's really important to get professional help.
And underpinning it all, that essential practice of self-compassion throughout the entire process.
Yeah, I think the sources taken together really deliver a clear message. It's empowering, actually.
How so?
That you do have the capacity to change this relationship with both food and your emotions. By learning to really identify what you need in the moment, is it fuel, is it comfort, is it connection, and then responding to that need constructively, rather than just automatically reaching for food as the default solution for everything.
Learning to meet the real need. Well, as you, our listener, continue on your own path with food and feelings, maybe here's a final thought to reflect on. What if the deepest kind of nourishment we're truly searching for isn't actually found on a plate at all, but in having the courage to simply be present with ourselves, to feel, acknowledge, and understand whatever's going on inside?
That's a powerful question.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.